Hi, I'm Azza, Director of the Pangolin Crisis Fund. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a former diplomat and a counter-wildlife trafficking specialist. I spent 14 years working for the British government, including as a senior diplomat in Kenya, and I've trained and mentored government rangers and wildlife scouts across East Africa in how to combat wildlife crime. And now I'm here with the Pangolin Crisis Fund, focusing on protecting the world's most heavily trafficked mammals, pangolins. Today, I'm going to give you an update on our strategy and share some exciting developments. Then I'm going to introduce you to our inspiring partners, African nature investors, and the Environmental Investigation Agency, whose incredible partnership is achieving huge progress in tackling the illegal wildlife trade in West Africa. So, first for a strategy update. As some of you may know, here at the Pangolin Crisis Fund, our strategy is threefold. We fund projects that protect pangolins and wild pangolin landscapes that can become strongholds for all 8 pangolin species across their ranges in Africa and Asia. We support counter-wildlife trafficking projects that disrupt the flow of pangolins, pangolin products, and other endangered species, and work to disrupt every link in the chain from poacher to consumer. And we also fund demand reduction initiatives that can help to close down the market for pangolin scales, meat, and other endangered species. Now, pangolins may be small, but they have some big problems. They are hunted right across their range in Africa and Asia for their scales, for their skins, and for their meat and claws. Hundreds of thousands of pangolins have been taken from the wild, and all 8 species of pangolins are now at risk of extinction. So the Pangolin Crisis Fund was created in 2019 to fight back for pangolins. And in just 3 years, the Pangolin Crisis Fund has become the world's largest funding mechanism dedicated to saving pangolins. So far, we've raised $4.4 million, supported 43 projects across 25 different countries, and are helping to protect all 8 species. And because we're helping to protect entire landscapes, and because wildlife traffickers trade in multiple species, our funding strategy helps to protect entire ecosystems and huge numbers of other species in addition to pangolins. Now, pangolins are shy nocturnal animals. They're relatively small in size, and because they live in burrows or high up in dense forest canopies, they're difficult for conservationists to monitor. This lack of data means we don't know how many pangolins are left in the wild, and we don't know how many are being poached. So I wanted to share a very exciting update. The Pangolin Crisis Fund has partnered with Langland Conservation to launch the Pangolin Landscape Project. This groundbreaking project works with local partners by collating and analysing the data that does exist, so we can get a better understanding of where pangolins are right across their ranges. And not only that, the project maps the landscape itself, analysing protected areas, altitude, roads, river systems, and human settlements to help support our partners, including analysing data from NASA to map bushfires that can indicate poaching, mapping logging concessions as there can be a crossover with wildlife trafficking, mapping mining concessions and palm oil concessions as these can have a devastating impact on habitats, as well as ports, which play a major role in the export of endangered wildlife. And all of this is critical because we need to know where the pangolins are in order to protect them. And we need to know where the threats are, like poaching hotspots and trafficking hubs and habitat threats, and to understand the factors that are driving them so that we can direct our funding to have the biggest possible impact. And we're helping to tackle these threats by supporting the management of key protected areas, empowering local communities, supporting education and teaching people about the forest, supporting alternative livelihoods and promoting environmental sustainability, to help entire communities share a place with nature for the benefit of people and wildlife, and to help entire ecosystems to survive and thrive. But all this work takes place in the context of wildlife trafficking conducted by serious organised criminals. This is a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry, so we also fund projects that support intelligence-led investigations and prosecution services, legislative reform, and that tackle the corruption that facilitate wildlife crime. Well, now you're going to meet two incredible partner organisations who work together to tackle all of these issues, protecting landscapes and combating wildlife trafficking. So we're zooming in to focus on Nigeria, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Tunde Morakinyo from Africa Nature Investors, who's going to take us on a journey to a very special national park.
My name is Tunde Morakinyo. I'm the Executive Director of the Annie Foundation. We're a not-for-profit organization registered in Nigeria, and our flagship project is the protection and development of Gashaka Gumti National Park. Gashaka is the largest national park in Nigeria, 7,000 square kilometers, located right on the border with Cameroon. And it's a spectacularly beautiful park, covered in rainforests in the mountainous south of the park. And then as you go further north, the park dries out and you move into dry woodland savanna. But right up in the mountains, you have montane grassland and cloud forest. And so it has an enormous diversity of plants and animals. But unfortunately, the park faces quite a number of threats, which basically places the park in danger. The park is threatened by logging, primarily for rosewood, for the Far East, mining in its rivers for gold and gemstones by artisanal miners, poaching for the bushmeat market, and forest fires from illegal cattle grazers. So these threats are really, really serious. And just in the last 2 years, we've started a program to deploy rangers across the park to deal with these threats. And we've been very, very lucky to receive some funds from the Pangolin Crisis Fund. This money is really important to us because Gashaka is a stronghold for pangolins in Nigeria. We have a significant population of white-bellied pangolins, and we are the only confirmed known location for the giant pangolin in Nigeria, which is critically endangered across the continent. So the funds from the Pangolin Crisis Fund are incredibly important for supporting our rangers who carry out these patrols to be able to curtail the illegal activities in the park. As important is the wider policy context. Even though we need to protect the pangolins in the park, dealing with the legislation that stops or discourages the illegal wildlife trade and therefore the hunting of pangolins is also important. So I'd like to introduce my colleague Wilson, who will speak to you about the important work he's doing to deal with the wider legislative context in Nigeria, which will help us stop the illegal hunting of pangolins. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wilson Ogoki, and I serve as the Wildlife Policy Coordinator for Africa Nature Investors Foundation, or ANI for short. In August 2021, EIA and ANI launched the report of a legislative analysis of Nigeria's legal framework for combating wildlife trafficking. The report of that analysis revealed serious deficiencies and gaps in Nigeria's legal framework for combating wildlife trafficking. Following the launch of the report of that analysis, and on the invitation of the Federal Ministry of Environment in Nigeria, EIA and ANI worked with the consultants to develop the Endangered Species Conservation and Protection Bill 2022. The core objective of their work on the bill was to ensure that the gaps highlighted by the report of the analysis were addressed and that Nigeria becomes compliant of its obligations under CITES, the Convention on Migratory Species, and other biodiversity conservation-related conventions to which it's a party. To that end, the bill incorporates model laws, guidelines, and best practices developed under those conventions, and if enacted, will ensure that Nigeria's ongoing efforts to combat wildlife trafficking is underpinned by a solid legislative basis. The bill itself is currently undergoing legislative action at the National Assembly. Progress has somewhat been slowed by ongoing political activities in Nigeria ahead of next year's general elections. However, EIA and ANI have continued to follow up with the sponsor of the bill, and he assures us that as soon as the House returns from its recess, he would formally present the bill on the floor of the House.
Thanks so much, Tunde and Wilson, for talking us through your inspiring work. Well, we're now going to meet another incredible team that are making extraordinary progress against wildlife trafficking. So I'm very excited to introduce you to Mary Rice, Executive Director of the Environmental Investigation Agency.
Okay, thanks, Azza, and thanks very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about our work. For those of you who are not familiar with the work of the Environmental Investigation Agency, we work to investigate, document, and expose environmental crime and abuse. And as our partners, Annie, have just been explaining, we've been working with them for the last couple of years, looking at how we can impact and negate the work of illegal wildlife traffickers in Nigeria. Nigeria has become the single biggest exit point for illegal wildlife trade out of the continent of Africa. And since the last conference of the parties to CITES in 2019, according to EIA's data, there has been almost 18 tons of ivory seized and around 110 tons of pangolin scales, all of which are linked to Nigeria, leaving Nigeria heading to Asia predominantly through Vietnam. Obviously, the work we do with Annie is to try and expose some of the organised criminal syndicates that are operating in Nigeria and exploiting weak governance. And it's also about bringing improved capacity and providing increased legislative control over illegal wildlife trade. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Erin now, who can talk to you a little bit more about the impact on pangolins in particular. Pangolins are now the biggest or the most trafficked mammal on the planet, and she can explain to you the impact of that.
Thanks for that, Mary. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a wildlife campaigner for pangolins at EIA, and I focus on the trade and demand of pangolin scales for traditional Chinese medicine. So pangolin scales are still being used for the purposes of traditional Chinese medicine, which threatens their populations in Africa and Asia. Demand reduction is a combination of consumer change and laws. The problem facing pangolins is that one of the largest consumers, China, maintains a domestic legal market for pangolin scales. As long as this market exists, the poaching and trafficking of pangolins will continue in order to meet this demand. At EIA, our work is in exposing the trade chain from Africa and Asia into China through investigations and intelligence gathering. We also document multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical companies which produce medicines containing pangolin scales and target large international investors who finance such companies. Through these efforts, we campaign for the closure of China's domestic market. Our work has found that as recently as 2021, raw pangolin scales continue to be discreetly traded in some of the largest traditional Chinese medicine ingredient markets in China. And in 2022, our research has identified over 50 products containing pangolin scales that are still being manufactured and publicly available for sale. If you would like to read our reports or learn more about EIA, you can visit our website at eia-international.org.